Okay, let's jump right into this. Imagine you spend years typing away in your office, right? You're pouring your imagination into this dark, gritty, really violent thriller novel.
Right, like a Stephen King sort of thing.
Exactly. And it hits the bestseller list, people buy it, and your whole career just takes off. But then, say, a year later, the police literally knock on your door with handcuffs,
Oh, wow.
and they tell you that your novel is actually a murder confession. I mean, that sounds like a plot to a dystopian movie, right? But right now in the American justice system, it is a very real reality for a specific group of artists.
It is. And welcome to today's deep dive, by the way. Because for most novelists or filmmakers, that scenario is purely hypothetical. But for rap artists, that line between a creative performance and a sworn legal confession is, well, it's basically vanishing entirely.
Right. The justice system is actively treating their recorded, commercially distributed music as if it's a notarized affidavit.
Exactly. And that brings us out of the theoretical realm and straight into a real courtroom in Georgia.
Let's unpack this, because this isn't some abstract debate. It is happening right now to Jeffrey Lamar Williams, who the world knows as the massively famous rapper Young Thug.
Right.
And looking at his specific trial really provides the perfect lens for you to understand the actual mechanics of how this legal strategy works. Because he hasn't just been charged with a single crime.
Yeah, no, it's much bigger than that.
Yeah, prosecutors are alleging that he and several others are running a whole criminal street gang called Young Slime Life, or YSL.
And the mechanism the prosecution is using to prove this alleged gang activity is, I mean, that's what makes this case such a watershed moment. What's fascinating here is they are building their argument using the RCO Act.
Right, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act.
Exactly. And in a RCO case, the state has to prove a pattern of criminal enterprise. They have to show that a group of people are operating together to commit crimes over a sustained period of time.
Okay, so how are they proving that pattern here?
Well, that's the thing. To establish that pattern, lawyers for the state aren't just relying on your traditional evidence, like, wiretaps or fingerprints or informant testimony. They are literally pulling his studio albums into the courtroom and reading the lyrics to the jury.
Which is just wild to wrap your head around. There's one specific track they focus on heavily, right? Called Slime Shit.
Yes.
And the song features all these lyrics detailing violence and gang activity. The core argument from the state is that the jury shouldn't look at these words as an entertainment product at all.
No, they are presenting these lyrics as literal confessions to actual real-world crimes.
But wait, I have to push back on that literal interpretation. Aren't rappers just creating fictional characters? I mean, they build these larger-than-life personas,
But
right?
they do, yeah.
The whole genre is built on a specific type of bravado where artists exaggerate or just outright invent elements of their street lives. They do it to entertain fans, build a brand, and ultimately sell records.
Yeah.
I mean, if an action movie star blows up a building on screen, we don't arrest them for arson.
Of course not. We understand it's a performance.
Right. So how can a judge look at a commercial rap album and tell a jury to treat it as the literal truth?
Well, that tension is the central battleground of this entire issue. When we look at the legal mechanics, there's a fundamental rule in the justice system against using what's called character evidence.
Okay, break that down for us.
So usually a prosecutor cannot bring up your past behavior or your general personality to prove you committed a specific crime. They can't just say, he wrote a violent song, therefore he is a violent person who committed this violent act.
Right, that makes sense.
But there is a major exception to that rule, and it's called a statement against interest or a party admission. Basically, if you say something that incriminates yourself, the state can use it against you.
Oh, I see. So the prosecution is essentially trying to bypass the rule against character evidence by categorizing the lyrics as direct party admissions.
Exactly.
They're saying he's not just playing a character who is violent. He, the actual defendant, is admitting to this specific act.
That is the exact legal maneuver they're pulling. They are asking the jury to basically forget the recording studio, forget the whole marketing campaign, and treat the lyrics as if the defendant just walked into a police station and wrote them down on a piece of paper.
Wow. But drawing that line forces us to look at the ultimate rule book for what the government can and cannot do,
Right.
the First Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Definitely. It's unavoidable.
Because if the government is deciding what qualifies as art versus what qualifies as a confession, we are stepping into incredibly dangerous territory, regarding freedom of speech and artistic expression.
We really are.
I mean, the First Amendment is the very shield that has historically protected authors of those detailed murder mysteries we talked about,
Mm.
or directors who create hyper-violent cinema.
It is. But the First Amendment is powerful, but it isn't an absolute shield. The courts have established certain exceptions where speech is not protected. Well, one of those is the true threats doctrine. That's where a statement is a serious expression of an intent to commit an act of unlawful violence to a particular individual. And another exception, like we just discussed, is a direct confession to a crime.
Right.
So the prosecution argues that you cannot use the First Amendment as a bulletproof vest if you are, in their view, using your art to confess to a homicide.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let's look at the legendary country singer Johnny Cash to see how this protection usually operates.
Oh, this is the perfect comparison.
Right, because Cash famously sang the line, "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die," in his song Folsom Prison Blues. I mean, millions of people bought that record. He performed it on national television.
Yep.
And the police in Reno didn't open a homicide investigation. They didn't drag Johnny Cash into an interrogation room and ask him to produce the weapon. Society and the legal system implicitly understood that he was assuming a narrative character.
Exactly. The legal system grants artists like Johnny Cash the benefit of the doubt. It recognizes the use of narrative devices, first-person storytelling, fictionalized personas.
Right. So why the double standard? Why does Johnny Cash get the benefit of the doubt as a storyteller, but Young Thug's lyrics are treated as a sworn affidavit?
Well, prosecutors argue there is a distinct threshold where that benefit of the doubt vanishes. And their legal argument here really hinges on the concept of specific details.
Specific details. Okay, how does that work? How does a prosecutor prove that a rap lyric isn't just a Johnny Cash-style narrative device?
They map the lyrics directly to police reports.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The state's argument is that if a rapper is just speaking generally about street violence, that remains protected art. But if a lyric matches the granular details of an active, real-world police investigation, that's different.
So, like, what kind of details are we talking about?
Like a specific date, a specific intersection, a specific caliber of weapon, or even the street nickname of a victim. If those line up, they say it crosses the threshold.
Okay, I see.
Prosecutors believe that if the artistic details align too perfectly with a crime scene, the First Amendment no longer applies. And then the jury has the absolute right to hear those lyrics as corroborating evidence.
But I mean, that specific details threshold seems incredibly flawed when you actually look at how hip-hop is created. The genre relies heavily on hyper-local authenticity.
It really does.
It was born as a form of documentary-style reporting for marginalized communities. Chuck D famously called it the CNN of the ghetto. Rappers constantly use real street names, real neighborhood landmarks, and hyperlocal slang just as a stylistic choice.
Right. It's about grounding the music.
Exactly. They are trying to ground their music in a recognizable reality for their listeners. If an artist weaves a fictional narrative, but sets it at a real intersection in their hometown to sound authentic, a prosecutor can look at that pursuit of authenticity and claim it's a confession.
Simply because a crime actually happened at that intersection.
Yeah, which is terrifying.
Yeah. It creates a massive vulnerability for the artist. Because hip-hop is an amalgamation. An artist might take one part of something they actually experienced, combine it with a story they heard from a friend, and then add 3 parts of purely fictional, movie-like fantasy.
Right, just putting it all together.
Exactly. And then they wrap the whole thing in a complex rhyme scheme. So when a prosecutor extracts 4 isolated lines from that amalgamation and presents them in a sterile courtroom, it's totally different.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Often they even bring in gang experts to decode the slang on the stand. And when they do that, the original artistic context is entirely destroyed.
Which really exposes a deeply uncomfortable societal fracture. Because understanding the legal mechanics, the push and pull between First Amendment protections and the prosecution's demand for specific evidence, it reveals how the laws actually applied across different cultures in the real world.
It does.
We're looking at a situation where 2 groups of professionals can examine the exact same 3-minute song and see fundamentally different things. So what does this all mean? How are we so divided on this?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, there are 2 firmly held, entirely opposing frames of justice operating here. And we have to impartially look at the logic driving both of them to grasp the full scope of this issue.
Okay, let's look at the first frame.
Right. The first frame is the perspective of law enforcement and prosecutors. For them, rap lyrics are a highly helpful, deeply necessary tool to solve violent crimes and keep communities safe.
And their logic is very straightforward. Law enforcement is dealing with real victims, real violence, and real grieving families.
Exactly. The stakes are literally life and death.
Right. So if individuals are actively bragging about their illegal actions on a public recording, or say, taunting rivals on social media and streaming platforms, police view ignoring that evidence as a complete dereliction of duty.
That's their view. To a detective trying to solve a homicide, it would be foolish to pretend a vital clue doesn't exist just because the suspect put a beat behind it.
Yeah.
The mechanism of modern gang activity often includes building a reputation through intimidation and public bragging.
Which makes sense from an investigative standpoint.
Right. Law enforcement argues that if a criminal is utilizing commercial platforms to further a criminal enterprise, to claim credit for violence and intimidate witnesses, the justice system has to adapt to that reality.
So they don't view it as an attack on art at all.
No, they view it as utilizing the evidence the suspect willingly provided.
Okay, but then you have the second frame, which comes from civil rights groups, legal scholars, and experts within the music industry. And they view this practice through a completely different, much darker lens.
Much darker.
To them, this isn't an innovative crime-solving technique. It is a dangerous, targeted attack on a specific culture. The most glaring point they raise is the disparity in how the law is applied. Hip-hop is literally the only musical genre that is routinely treated this way by the American justice system.
And the disparity is striking. I mean, death metal bands sing graphically about mutilation. Country singers sing about shooting cheating spouses. Pop stars sing about stalking and revenge.
Right, it's everywhere in music.
But you do not see prosecutors projecting those lyrics onto a screen in a courtroom to establish a pattern of criminal behavior. Civil rights advocates point to this and argue that the practice of putting rap on trial unfairly targets young men of color.
They see a system taking individuals who are actively attempting to build a legal, lucrative career in the music industry and punishing them for utilizing the standard tropes of their genre.
Right, and it's a huge issue.
If a rapper uses violence as a metaphor or a narrative device, the exact same way Johnny Cash or Quentin Tarantino does, they're criminalized for it. The defense lawyers argue that this is just systemic bias disguised as legal strategy.
And it creates a zero-sum game, which is why this is one of the most complicated debates in the modern legal system. Both sides passionately believe their viewpoint is the only way to achieve actual justice.
It's impossible to reconcile.
Exactly. Law enforcement believes justice is served by using every available tool to convict violent offenders and protect the community. Civil rights groups believe justice is destroyed when constitutional rights are selectively applied based on the genre of music you perform and the demographic you belong to.
There's no easy compromise between a detective trying to close a murder case and an advocate trying to protect the First Amendment.
No, there really isn't.
It's a massive fracture in how we view the intersection of art and law. Just to sort of recap the incredible terrain we've covered on this deep dive.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
We started on the ground in Georgia with the Ari Keough trial of Young Thug, breaking down how a commercial album is literally transformed into a statement against interest. We navigated the complex waters of the First Amendment, looking at how the legal shield that protects authors, directors, and Johnny Cash is bypassed by prosecutors mapping specific details to police reports.
Right.
And we arrived at this unbridgeable cultural divide over how hip-hop is policed compared to the rest of the entertainment world.
It forces a real re-examination of what society considers to be literal truth versus artistic expression. And, critically, who actually gets the privilege of having their art legally recognized as fiction.
Which leaves you with a pretty terrifying final thought to mull over regarding the future of the genre.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if defense lawyers are right, if artists are simply exaggerating their gritty, street-level lives, primarily to entertain fans and build a commercial brand, and then prosecutors successfully use those commercial exaggerations to secure convictions, aren't we essentially turning a music marketing strategy into a prison sentence?
That's the fear. Because the criminalization of a persona doesn't just affect the person on trial, it ripples out. If artists know that their rhymes are quite literally on trial, it creates a massive chilling effect.
Will the fear of prosecution eventually erase the authentic, raw, documentary-style storytelling that made hip-hop a global phenomenon in the first place? I mean, think about it. If that author we talked about at the very beginning of the show knew that every dark thought they typed into their thriller novel could one day be read to a jury as a murder confession, the likelihood is they would never write the book at all.
The page would just stay blank.
Exactly. The page would stay blank. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the things you listen to, and we will catch you next time.